Hello. Today we are going to examine America's political insanity versus common sense. My name is Scott McCloskey, and I am a concerned American just like you. Our nation is in big trouble and requires a revolutionary solution to fix our national political system. I have a very important question for you today. Do you ever see our divisive, combative, corrupt national political system getting any better if it is kept exactly the same? I have asked hundreds of people this very question, and everyone has answered this question with an emphatic no. Most people add that it will only get worse. I call my channel No Politics because the changes to our national political system and constitution I am proposing would eliminate combative voting, divisive political parties, corrupt money influence, and create national unity. I'm a constitutionalist, but also a realist, and know that common sense changes need to be made to our Constitution and national political system. After 230 plus years, we know what has worked and what hasn't with our Constitution. My mission, with your help, is to create a grassroots movement to push for these common sense changes and direct America toward true citizen government. Please watch the entire video because later we will talk about the solution to fix our broken federal government and how you can participate in this grassroots movement. Before we talk about America's political insanity, I want you to imagine an America with no divisive political parties, no corrupt money influence in our national politics, no career politicians, term limits, true citizen government where no one is disenfranchised, and a unified federal government of which we can all be proud. This is possible with the revolutionary idea that I will introduce today. This idea is so logical, simple, and efficient that, in my opinion, it is easily the best government idea since our Constitution was written in 1787. Now, let's talk about America's political insanity first. We Americans are at a crossroads. We are politically divided with virtually no hope of improvement if everything remains the same. Politics have divided us to the point where family members refuse to talk to each other, and civility in our national politics is wishful thinking. The 2016 and 2020 presidential elections have only divided us further. If this division continues, we may be headed towards civil war. Abraham Lincoln once said, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." He was absolutely right. If we keep our political system the same, can we expect a different result? This is the very definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. The division we are talking about includes the federal government, political parties, the American voters, and the media. Speaking of a divided media, if an alien came down to Earth and turned on CNN, MSNBC, CBS, NBC, or ABC, then switched to Fox News, Fox Nation, or Newsmax, he would think he had visited two different planets. In addition, social media is dividing us in the form of Facebook, Twitter, and others by attacking free speech and shutting down the accounts of those they disagree with politically. This is clearly discrimination and an affront to free speech. In my opinion, the answer is more speech, not less. So how did we become so divided? This has been a systemic issue from the beginning of our country. On September 19, 1796, after almost 8 years as our first president, George Washington warned Americans in his farewell address of the emergence of political parties and foreign entanglements. He was right about both and shown to be a prophet. In my opinion, there are three divisive elements in our federal government that must be eliminated before we can move toward unity and efficiency. The first divisive element to eliminate at the national level is voting. You may think it's absolutely crazy to suggest eliminating voting at the federal level, but as you will see, if you follow the evidence of how our nation has become so divided, it directly leads to the voting process. The voting process comes with a lot of baggage. There are trust issues with voting. Many Americans feel that their vote doesn't count. In many cases, they are right. In 1960, many women voted for John F. Kennedy simply because he was very handsome. This happened again in 1992 with Bill Clinton. These are just two examples of people voting for the wrong reasons. Voting is combative, divisive, emotional, and not logical, and voting directly leads to divisive political parties. There are numerous polarizing issues that divide American voters into political parties. One of these issues is abortion. If a pro-choice candidate ran against a pro-life candidate, there would be people lining up to support each candidate before a vote was even cast. This is how these polarizing issues have created political parties. In the beginning of our country, there was disagreement on how large and powerful our new federal government should be. This disagreement led to John Adams leading the rapidly forming Federalist Party, who believed in a bigger, stronger federal government, and Thomas Jefferson heading the rapidly forming Democrat-Republican Party, who supported a weaker and smaller federal government. This divisive issue created political parties during George Washington's presidency, and we have been subjected to them ever since. On the flip side, 30 to 35% of American citizens never register to vote their entire lives. This tells us that many people could care less about voting and have no faith in the process. In my opinion, voting is great for entertainment venues such as the Oscars, the Emmy Awards, Miss America, Most Valuable Player Awards, but not politics. The voting process is too unstable, divisive, and unreliable to trust our national politics too, where currently life and death decisions are made by our politically partisan representatives who are beholden to their political parties, not the American people. A more logical, less divisive, less corrupt, and emotionally stable system is needed. Most of us would agree that a representative republic is a good idea. Our job is to devise a better representative republic without divisive voting, polarizing political parties, corrupt money in our national politics, and contaminated media influence. The second divisive element to eliminate in our national politics is the formation of these political parties. Because of the divisive voting process, these harmful political parties formed and continue to be sustained. This has turned us into red states and blue states, a 50% Democrat, 50% Republican country. I don't ever see this changing. Once a person has adopted a political philosophy, it is nearly impossible to change their mind. Can I get an amen to that? These destructive political parties take turns taking control of our federal government every 4 to 8 years and undo what the prior administration did. How long are we going to let this insanity continue? These competitive political parties have led to a divided electorate, unnecessary political drama, corrupt money influence, divided families, a divided media, allegiance to party instead of loyalty to our country, career politicians, the mindset of winning re-election at all costs, and drawing partisan voter district lines to ensure re-election. This is called gerrymandering. In my opinion, every major problem facing America today can be traced back to these combative political parties that the voting process has spawned. Political parties have indoctrinated us by suggesting we identify ourselves as Democrats or Republicans. And many Americans do, instead of thinking of themselves as independent thinking Americans. Many people think a third party is the answer, but this will only divide us further, and the two parties are so powerful, they will never let this happen. An outside-the-box, common-sense solution to eliminate voting, political parties, and corrupt money influence is what is needed at the national level. The third divisive element that we must eliminate in our national politics is corrupt money influence. Political donors and lobbyists expect a return on their investment after spending millions of dollars to get their candidates elected. And the elected candidates feel obligated to vote as the donors and lobbyists wish. This is legalized bribery. In addition, there is no transparency. Oftentimes, political donors legally form front groups to hide who they really are. If you are getting value from this video, please hit the like button, turn your notifications on to be alerted to new videos, leave a comment, and subscribe, and share this video with your contacts. Much more information is available on my website, which is listed below. Now, let's talk about how to fix our broken federal government, which is explained in my book entitled The Miracle of QRS, which you can purchase on Amazon by clicking on the link below or going to my website. QRS is short for Qualified Random Service. Qualified Random Service replaces divisive voting, eliminates combative political parties, and corrupt money influence in our federal government and national politics. By qualified, I mean acquiring the knowledge that the job requires. QRS would also eliminate unnecessary political drama, and partisan media influence. American citizens would still vote in local and state elections. Our federal representatives in each state, in every state across the nation, of which there are 435, would be chosen by qualified random service. Currently, the only constitutional requirements for a representative are that they be 25 years old and a citizen for 7 years. This is a very low threshold of qualification and is almost laughable. In reality, our representatives don't have to know much about the jobs they seek, and oftentimes this has been the case. Under the QRS system, they would need to have a common foundation of knowledge by studying our history, the American Revolution, the Constitution, the Federalist Papers, which were the arguments to ratify the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, economics, finance, and how a proper representative republic operates, and failed systems of government to avoid. They would need to pass an exam on these subjects to serve just like any other federal government employee who is required to pass a civil service exam to get a government job. Why should our government representatives be any different? Once meeting these knowledge requirements needed to do their jobs, they are then eligible to enter the random selection process. And a representative is chosen at random from the qualified, knowledgeable group. The QRS process for senators and president would also require QRS certification and is more complex, but would unfold with little political drama, media partisanship, and no corrupt money influence involved. A future video will detail this process for senators and the president. It would be required that all federal government employees, except the military, be QRS certified to promote unity, stability, and common knowledge. Qualified random service would improve our federal government by eliminating divisive voting, voter disenfranchisement, voter suppression and fraud, partisan media involvement on both sides, combative political parties, annoying campaign ads that we all hate, and the millions of campaign donor dollars in our federal politics that buy political influence and lead to corruption. QRS imposes term limits, eliminates the electoral college system, and the need to gerrymander voting districts because there are no elections at the federal level under QRS. QRS also eliminates the possibility of foreign meddling in our national elections because there are no national federal elections under the QRS system. QRS would put an end to deficit spending and our $30 trillion debt. This debt only happens because both political parties pander for votes by giving away government goodies. This is known as the Santa Claus effect. Eliminating voting, political parties, and corrupt money influence at the national level are all game changers that create national unity and would return civility and honesty to our federal politics. No one I know is thinking outside the box to improve how we select our representatives, senators, and president. Our current federal government is just accepted as it is with all its flaws. How great could America be if the shackles of our divisive, corrupt federal government were removed and true citizen government was implemented? If we don't make common sense changes soon to improve our combative, corrupt federal government, we may not be here in 25 to 50 years. Remember what Abraham Lincoln said? A house divided against itself cannot stand. What is the long-term cost of doing nothing? Under QRS, our representatives, senators, and the president would not be worried about re-election or toeing the party line because there are no elections or political parties at the national federal level. They would be free to follow our constitutional blueprint. Currently, our representatives, senators, and president feel obligated to please their party leaders and their voters. This would not be the case under QRS. Under our current voting system, our representatives are accountable to their voters first because they want to get reelected, and the Constitution is an afterthought. Under QRS, our representatives would be accountable to the Constitution first because there are no voters to pander to. The QRS system would give Congress a common foundation of knowledge and beliefs to create unity, not division. The QRS Congress's common purpose would be to implement the constitutional blueprint for political life in America. Under the QRS system, Congress and the President would be on the same page. QRS has safeguards to ensure that members of Congress follow the Constitution. unlike our current political system, which has no such safeguards. This has resulted in a compromised constitution and disunity. Where's the common ground between Rand Paul, a constitutionalist, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a socialist? This divergence of thought is very divisive and cannot be reconciled. Political arguments in Congress should take place within the constitutional framework. Socialism and communism are not within the constitutional framework. Under QRS, any citizen could participate in the QRS process if they choose to do so. Under the QRS system, no one is disenfranchised, which is in stark contrast to our voting system. Congress currently consists of 40% lawyers. QRS would ensure more diverse representation across America and lead to true citizen government. QRS would take a constitutional amendment to make the necessary changes to our Constitution. Implementation of QRS is possible today with the internet and social media. In the early 1900s, the 16th Amendment was added, which was the income tax. The 17th Amendment was changed, which is how senators are chosen. And the 18th Amendment was also added, which was the prohibition of alcohol. Incredibly, these three controversial amendments to the Constitution were passed with no internet and social media being in existence. So how can you help? You can help by hitting the like button, turning on your notifications, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing this video with your friends, going to my website, www.scottdmccloskey.com, to learn more and sign up to my email list. Please consider clicking on the link below to purchase the book entitled The Miracle of QRS, which explains the QRS system in great detail and historically documents how our nation became so politically divided. In order to make an impact, this movement will need millions of passionate subscribers who are fed up with the pitfalls of voting, divisive political parties, corrupt money influence, and an agenda-driven media. It's time to debate the political insanity of America's national political system and the common sense improvements that need to be made. The founders designed a government of we the people so we could fix our government if it became broken. Don't you think it's time to fix it? Won't you join us? I will see you in the next video.